this event is sponsored by Public Square. If you guys want to help win the culture war and support businesses that support our values, download the Public Square app. Check out businesses in your area. I really do mean it.
But I want to talk about the national debt for a minute. 33 trillion, counting. We just printed 250 billion in one day, which is what? Is that a national record, all-time record? It looks like the interest is compounding such that it's impossible to pay back. That the only way to pay back that 33 trillion is to borrow 33 trillion at interest, and then we can pay back the balance, but then we owe interest on the 33 trillion we just borrowed, and it's a never-ending Ponzi scheme. So is there any value to defaulting on the interest that we owe the Federal Reserve?
Or ending the Fed?
One step at a time, but yeah, I'd like that too.
Well, and honestly, the Fed is how we've got in the position because, like, you know, Grover Norquist, who I think right now is actually paying for advertisements attacking me, he set up this paradigm that, well, if we just stop tax increases, then we'll be able to starve the beast of money. And while you got politicians to agree to that in large scale, you still have Fed policy that continues to pick winners and losers across the board. I worry about the $8 trillion that is about ready to have to be refinanced at higher interest rates. We have $8 trillion of that debt that, you know, is at very, very low interest rates, infinitesimally low. And now when you're refinancing that now, that's going to affect APR, that's going to affect every auto loan, every home loan, and the cost of money is going to go through the roof. I don't know that defaulting on the interest makes that problem any better. I could see a number of circumstances where it could make it worse.
By the way, you know who is feeling that the most right now? So here's a basic math for you. A $500,000 loan, today versus a year ago. If you get a $500,000 loan, the average person, let's just say, at 8% today, you got a 720 credit score. It's not a great score, but you got a decent credit score, 720. $500,000 at 8%, 30 years at 720 credit score, your mortgage payment is $3669, roughly $3,700. 18 months ago, that $500,000 loan at 3%, 720 credit score, 30 years. Ready? $2,100.
Wow.
From $2,100 to $3,700, but check this out. The bank is gonna now see at what income you need to make to be able to afford that house. So you gotta take that $2,170 and you gotta divide it by 36%. Just do that on your math, on your calculator, come up with $5,500 a month, which means the bank's gonna expect you to make roughly 70 grand a year to qualify for this $500,000 loan at 3% interest rate to be $2,170. At the 8%, which is $3,700, divided by 36%, you would need to make $122,000 a year in 18 months, from 70 grand a year to 122. So as much as you and I are talking about national debt, and I'm very worried about the national debt, the average person sitting there saying, how the hell am I supposed to afford to buy a house today? My income's not going up. Everyone's going on strikes right now. Unions dividing employer against employees. People are not starting small businesses like they did before. You're talking about interest rate on the $8 trillion. You know how scary that is when you go through the new rate? That is absolutely catastrophic. We sold the company last year, July 1st of 2022, right before where money got expensive. If we would have sold the company a month later versus a month prior, we would have made 20%, 10% less on the sale of the company because money kept getting more and more and more and more expensive, so the buyers cannot go buy everything that's cheap. Today, commercial property, I'm sure you saw this, WeWork in 2017. You guys heard of WeWork. Everybody here knows WeWork. You know what WeWork was worth in 2017 when SoftBank gave them $18.9 billion? It was valued at $47 billion. You know what happened to WeWork this week? They could not make a $95 million payment. Wow. They went into default. A $47 billion, and what does that tell you? That's commercial real estate. So the lowest, we haven't yet seen the 2008 default on mortgage payments that we did, which hit the real estate market. We haven't experienced that, but you're seeing it in commercial real estate. They're not making the payments today, and it's pretty ugly. And you're seeing it in the subprime segment of car payments. So people who got subprime loans, these are lower level credit score, 600, 580s, that they got those kind of loans, they're defaulting on their car payments right now. So we're seeing it in different pockets, and then eventually these people that don't want to sell their homes because they're sitting on a 3% interest, all of a sudden, if they start saying, babe, we're running out of money, babe, we got to sell this house. We got to sell this out. What are we going to do with this? Once that happens next, you're going to feel it. So there's some economists today that are saying everything's going to be all right. Yeah, you know, it's just going to be a soft landing, all this kind of bullshit they're giving you. But there's some guys behind closed doors that are like, listen, man, this Michael Burry guy is worried about the S&P 500. No one knows what's really going to be happening right now. They're seeing what's going on with unemployment and the job market, so they're going to bump the rates again another quarter basis point in the next month or two. They do that the next 30, 60, 90 days. No one's thinking 33 trillion. People are thinking, how the hell am I going to pay my payment, and how am I going to increase my income? It's going to be an interesting next 3-6 months for the average voter.
Well, maybe if the average person can't afford to buy a house anymore, there's some kind of low-income personal occupancy device, POD for short, they could buy instead. And then if the food becomes too expensive, there's always bugs. So I guess my point is perhaps it's on purpose. We know that there's been these big financial interests buying up residential homes, converting them into rentals. Now with what you're describing, it's becoming more and more difficult to be an independent human being, especially with a family. So one segment I recorded on is AOC wants to raise the income tax on New York residents who are in the top 5% of income earners. The top 5% is not the same as the top 1%. It's a huge leap. And there was an organization that said, basically what you're saying is anybody who makes $250,000 a year or more in New York City. Now, $250,000 a year is a lot of money, but in New York City, you're talking about a man and a woman who are both working full-time, hard enough to have a family, and they're each making like 127.
And they're living in Jersey.
And they're right, and living in Jersey. A one-bedroom apartment is $4,000 in New York City. So you're talking about a third about a third or a little bit more than a third of your income every month in just rent. Don't forget food. Now, what if you want to have kids? As they increase taxes and increase the pressure and make it harder to buy, now you're talking. Do you want to own? That's going to be impossible.
Yeah.
And it's going to be $5,000 or $6,000 a month to even own anything. The reality is, you need a 3 or 4 bedroom if you're a young married couple trying to have a family. But now both parents are working full time. They have no choice but to put their kids in institutionalized learning facilities. The reality is, with everything you're talking about, it's not just about the family saying, "Hey, we're running out of money. We got to sell the house." It's about millennials saying, "I've never had a house. I can't even get married. I can't have kids. I can't afford it at all." The end result being, whether you think it's intentional or not, people are going to live in pods and they're going to eat bugs because they don't have the money.
And no wealth is being built because
Right.
we've been converted into a generation of renters. And you look at how the boomers built wealth, it was typically through home ownership. It's the number one way the last generation built wealth. And I think it goes back to the point culturally about how we think about family formation. And when your starter home is your forever home, because you can't leave it, because you can't get out of that low interest rate for the simple math that Patrick was describing, it changes the way you think about your prospects to be able to grow and be able to be more as a family.
If you're lucky enough to get a house over BlackRock that has very low interest rates compared to your 8% interest rates, I think there's a reason Thomas Jefferson warned that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. I think what we're seeing right now with the U.S. Federal Reserve, what we saw with the secret bailouts that they did during COVID, that they did in 2008, are so incredibly incredulous. We're talking about trillions of dollars that passed through the banking system to all these institutions, BlackRock, State Street, JP Morgan and Chase, that, by the way, just settled the Jeffrey Epstein lawsuit where they were caught being complicit in aiding the raping of thousands of children for over 30 plus years. So when we're looking at these big banks, when we're looking at the Federal Reserve, how do we solve this? Because I really, really do believe that this is being done on purpose in order to sow chaos and civil unrest. I think they're going to bleed us dry, and then they're going to set us loose, and then chaos is going to happen.
But why, though? Why would they do that?
Because it's Swiss. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Why would they do that, though? Think about why they would do that.
Problem, reaction, solution. So I think they are motivated towards creating chaos. Why did Dr. Fauci, along with Peter Daszak and Eco Health Alliance, work on making essentially a bioweapon? Why did the banksters in 2008 have banker bailouts while, of course, having the taxpayer for it? Why is the system so corrupted? Why did the FBI for 30 plus years look the other way and ignored victims of Jeffrey Epstein that came to them? The system is rotten and it thrives off of misery, and I think it's going to create more misery through the banking system very soon.
For me, I think there's two ways. Yeah, you can make some noise for him. So I'm at a church and my pastor gets up and he says, this is in LA, Pastor Dudley Rutherford. He says, you know, there's this guy in the church, he's not getting baptized every week, he's not getting baptized. And the pastor said, well, God loves you. God loves you. God loves you. This is a moment. If you're dealing with something, you want to walk up, this is the time to do it. It's like nobody was walking. He says, one day, another pastor tells me, says, why don't you start selling hell? He says, what do you mean? So just try selling hell. So I don't understand. Tell them what happens if they don't give their life to Christ. So the pastor gets up on stage and says, if you don't give your life to Christ, here's what hell's gonna look like. And it goes into this mess about hell. So, oh my God, hundreds of people come. I want to be a Christian. I want to get baptized, right? So selling hell works.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.